The Syntax of Things by Arisha. Chapter 45. To be a Fool. Epilogue. There was no problem in this world so serious that couldn't be solved with a glass of fire whiskey. The flames in the hearth bowed and arched as they burned the woods away. So eager they seemed that if they were let to run rampant, they would destroy the very things they were meant to illuminate. Embryonic bonfires they would become, each bearing a seed of destruction so potent it could tumble cities and dash kings to their knees. Forgotten remarks and muffled words came alive in Severus's mind as the first bottle was emptied, demanding to be noticed. Nonsense like, "I will not reveal my secret, Keeper, but you have to trust me, Severus. Your flu network shall transfer you, and only you, back and forth. It will take you to the safe house, and... Be careful, my boy. You need to remain near Voldemort until the end." His sudden urge to sneak into the Gryffindor Tower and abduct Potter for good was replaced by the reasonable substitute of summoning another bottle, which was a complete failure, for his eye focus quivered under heavy eyelids and his wand twitched unexpectedly in his loose grip. The bottle he'd so eagerly summoned never arrived. Instead, it crashed against the wall and landed on the carpet with a thud. Here it was, then. The last day of classes, and modesty be damned! Why wait another day so he could drink at home when he could also drink here? The little bastard would have to die. He would never become an Orber, thank God for that. He would never see adulthood. Not that adulthood was ever promised to be a bright experience for Potter. Well, he never taken up the arts then. It occurred to Severus that 2 out of the 3 men that dominated his life were bent, and he silently prayed for the Dark Lord to differ. It wouldn't do to kill Potter and then dance around his corpse in a pink petticoat and tights, although that would be a reasonable excuse for Severus to quit the whole Death Eater business. Lucius would understand. Downing another glass filled with something he couldn't recall summoning, he briefly wondered what they'd think of him at Hogsmeade, storming into the liquor store mere moments before closing to purchase an entire box of whatever and a second box of really anything. What does it even matter? He thought of Potter's decision to once more abandon effort just when he'd started improving. He was probably determined to prove Severus rubbish at teaching, no matter what. The boy deserved to be sodomized for his audacity. On second thought, no, better not. Severus shook his head. Was he bitter? Absolutely. Hurt? Well, everybody felt a part of their heart break at rejection. It was natural. To him, rejection triggered so much more. It drove him, fed him, made one hell of a story. And what would happen if the Dark Lord insisted that Severus killed Dumbledore? Dumbledore would flee. For how long? Who would guard the school? Another glass. Fuck the glass bottle. Dumbledore wouldn't flee. There would be no excuse for Severus not to do it. Damn, he was a dead man. A dead man playing Russian roulette with a 3-bullet gun. Somehow he had the assuredness that all 3 bullets would eventually get him. At once, most likely. He sighed heavily. Dumbledore's ideals of love and gratitude were not helping. Love made the world go round? Not at all. Whiskey made it go round twice as fast. He drank generously, fearing the moment it might stop. The blissful silence of the room was interrupted by a continuous thudding of knuckles against wood. Severus closed his eyes and prayed for it to go away, crossing his fingers for it to be caused by ghosts. At the reminder that ghosts didn't knock on doors, it occurred to him that to get pissed and be left alone was apparently a wish in vain. Steadying himself with some effort, Severus shook his head into sobriety and unlocked the door. Potter stormed in, excitedly. "I thought you were asleep." "What do you want?" "Last day of classes. We had a party in the common room. Everyone's dropped asleep by now." Severus searched between Potter's words to find an actual explanation of why Potter was here and failed. "And? Be sharper, you're failing." "So you know. I figured Dumbledore wouldn't mind, since we'll be spending the summer together anyway." This was exactly the misery Severus had been trying to forget. Alcohol worked better than obliviation, and had proved itself much safer, too. Coming to terms with this doom by himself had been going great. The process now seemed to be slowly drift away and fade into a mystical puddle that contained all his abandoned intentions and promises. "How does it occur to you that I might mind?" Potter smiled eagerly as he sat on his usual spot on the couch. "You know? Is that fire whiskey?" He poured himself a glass and tasted it. Severus sat back down, reminding himself that if he were to endure this again, he'd have to at least be the one who'd make the rules. He snatched the bottle away and gave Potter a warning look. "If you want me to let you stay, you will behave. This time, I mean it." He'd meant it all the past times too, but he'd been ignored, just as he imagined that he was going to be ignored tonight. What did it matter? The last Potter alive would soon be dead.
You should have seen Ron. He wanted to talk to me, but he was too embarrassed to do it on his own. He told Hermione to tell me to go and talk to him first.
Potter shook his head, an honest smile on his face as he took the bottle back from Severus.
Fascinating, I think. It is. I thought he was never going to talk to me again. Ginny told me she forgives me too. I suppose they didn't know what to say to their family for not talking to me anyway. Things have calmed down a lot now. God, this thing sucks.
It's alcohol, therefore is good. To prove his point, he downed his glass and let the warm liquid burn his throat. Obliviation wouldn't come tonight, after all. If ever.
Why don't you arrange Slytherin parties too? You know, try and have fun or something. All the other houses do it.
Potter shrugged and Severus tried to remember when was the last time the boy was babbling this much. Or grinning so widely. We have parties. We just don't brag about it. Slytherins, unlike you, have dignity. It hadn't been so long since the last time Potter had been in this room anyway. It seemed insignificant now. Severus adjusted to what he had become used to. Company, he almost called it.
Is this your way of partying?
Potter pointed at the bottle, and Severus had to suppress a sudden urge to hug it protectively.
Getting pissed in the dark every time you hate your life or something? Severus Snape, the party animal.
Potter snorted, and Severus fixed his jaw. I don't suppose that little Gryffindor party of yours contained alcohol, did it? Potter's flushed face suggested that it did.
That would be prohibited, Professor,
he said innocently. Severus scoffed. Idiot. What could he do? Taking points would only embarrass him further when Minerva gave them back in dozens the day after. Getting pissed in the dark sounded like a nice plan all of a sudden. He admired the darkness of his chambers. If Potter was bothered by it, Potter was free to go.
Just idiot? Where did the insolent little wretch go? You're losing your touch, Snape. You need to see me more often, I think.
More often? The only place in Severus's life Potter didn't occupy anymore was his dreams. Then again... Stop. Shut up, Potter. I keep thinking you can only embarrass yourself so much, yet you never peek. Potter laughed.
That's what I meant.
Don't you have things to do before we lock you up in paradise? Severus asked after a long moment. It was a hot night, but it didn't feel like soothing the hearth. The sparks stuck on the wood before burning out tiny acclamations that died over and over again to be greeted by stronger ones.
Not much. I still have to see Luna tomorrow. She wants to give me a copy of that magazine her dad sells, but there's no rush. Besides, I thought you'd be lonely.
Severus snorted around a satisfying gulp. He had never been lonely. He had been in a room. He had felt suicidal. He had felt awful, beyond all. But he'd never felt that one other person could enter that room and cure what tormented him, or that any number of people could enter that room. Speak for yourself, he spat, and immediately regretted the bluntness of his impulse to defend himself. Potter didn't respond. Loneliness was something Severus had never been bothered by, because he always had this terrible itch for solitude. He never felt tempted to go out and have the widely recommended fun. It wouldn't help. He mentally watched the typical crowd getting excited about it being Friday night, asking each other, what are you going to do? Where were you going to go? And Severus felt nauseated at their lack of purpose. There was nothing out there. It was stupidity. Stupid people mingling with stupid people, satisfying themselves with stupidity, and that was all. He had never been lonely. He liked himself. He was the best form of entertainment he had. Cheers, Severus drawled. Their glasses clunk, and Potter cast a Loomis.
If you were more unhappy, I'd think you'd become a ghost.
Boo, then. Potter's face lit up mischievously, and he placed his drink on the table.
You know what? I'm not going to just silently sit in the dark because you're being weird. I won't be smelling any fresh air for the next 3 months or so, and who knows, I might die soon anyway, so we're going out. The astonishment of the truth Potter had unwittingly blurted out hit Severus first, and he was unable to comprehend the rest of the sentence. He replayed it inside his head and almost grunted. You've lost your mind now, haven't you? Don't start grumbling now. Come on, get up.
Potter pulled on his cloak, excited about his plan. And as it usually happened, Severus despised plans. A bodiless head floated around the room as Potter grabbed Severus's hand, and Severus found himself being pulled up. "If you think I'm going to agree to this idiocy, you're a fool." "Fools win." "I've agreed with the headmaster that this lunacy will stop. I only let you in tonight because it's the last day and—"
"Exactly, so it doesn't matter what you do."
It did matter. The hand that tugged on his sleeve was suddenly too strong. Severus shook it away. "If you wish to stay, stay. I'm not going anywhere." Why did he have to apologize for the simplest things? Why was his dominance constantly ridiculed?
"Right, now stop yammering and be quiet. I know how to get out."
Harry Potter, ruthless, unprincipled, determined to get them both killed.
They'll see us, you moron!
Do you forget my position, or do you confuse me for your mindless little rule-breaking friends? Have you forgot that the castle is not inhabited by your astonishing person only?
May I drink alone, please?
No, bend down. The world blurred a little as the thin fabric of the unseeable cloak covered him, and he was immediately frozen in awe. Potter's elbow poked at his ribs. "Now we have to stand a little close. I know you don't like that, but you'll have to bear it. Bend a little, 'cause your feet are still visible."
Severus complied, silently damning himself for doing so. The scent of the Potter family was suddenly all around him, and he questioned his having agreed to this while Potter led him to the corridor just in time to remember that he had not actually agreed. The ludicrous contraption was all but comfortable, and Severus inwardly appreciated the many levels of irony that had brought him under this very cloak. Sweet blasphemy, he thought to himself, taking a moment to relish into the fantasy of James Potter watching them from the world of the dead with utter sorrow.
"Careful, damn you!" "Sorry. I swear, Potter, if you step on my foot one more time, I'll—" "Shush."
Potter's hand came up to his own mouth and covered it as Peeves floated past them. Severus held his breath. Peeves looked suspiciously at where they stood. Potter stared up at Snape steadily. Severus wholeheartedly hoped that his own scowl communicated, "I'm going to kill you!" Before he had enough time to make his untold threat clear, Peeves dove into the wall behind them, passing through them. The warmth of the living wasn't something a cloak could hide.
Students out of their beds! Students out of their beds! They're here! Students out of their beds!
Peeves yelled, excitedly jumping around in the air.
This was it then!
A very sorry end for the great potions master, Severus Snape, and not even a potions master anymore.
He closed his eyes, waiting for his fate. Potter tugged at his shirt.
"Run, quickly."
Unable to protest, and already in terms with the oncoming reality of unemployment, he followed. What was he going to tell Dumbledore? How was he going to explain this?
"All I wanted was to drink!" Or, so very typical,
"I was already drunk!"
Potter grunted as he pushed at the entrance hall gate with all his might and found that it remained shut. He did it again, grunting furiously, and Severus had to steel himself from the task of blocking out the annoying friction against his torso and the back of Potter's head hitting his chin again and again.
"You're a teacher. I suppose you know the spell,"
whispered Potter angrily, and Severus was nearly blinded by his rage. He was about to announce that he would not reveal the staff's locking spells for the sake of Potter's entertainment, just as Peeves' voice seemed to be getting closer to them again.
Students out of their beds! Students out of their beds!
Oh, for pity's sake! He cast the spell and recast it to lock the door just as they stepped out. Yanking the cloak off his head, Severus panted hard, leaning back against the door.
"You,"
he said coolly.
"You don't say a word." "Can't he see us now?"
Potter asked, already wandering further away to the yard.
"He haunts the castle. He can't get out,"
Severus said, although Potter should know this. Not that it meant anything. The castle had windows. Anyone could see them. This was suicide! Are you satisfied now?
"Aren't you? Look at the sky."
Potter spread his arms and rotated around himself. His head dropped back.
"The sky,"
Severus sneered.
"I'm risking my position so you can take a look at the sky, as though you don't live in a goddamn tower."
He released a sharp breath, and his eyes darted around to make sure that no one was watching them. Potter picked up his cloak from the ground, and Severus watched it enraged.
"Just look at the sky,"
Potter said quietly. There was kindness in his eyes. Severus's chest stiffened. He glared at Potter hard before he gave up. He looked. A sudden, bitter cold wind howled across the landscape, and Severus recalled that he hated nights like this, caught between darkness and light, hovering endlessly on the brink of secret magic. The beauty Potter saw was invisible to him. A half-lit world, full of half-kept promises, offered him nothing but unwanted memories. Unable to protest, he kept to himself the useless arguments and stared at the sky instead, letting Potter's foolish romanticism remind him of all the silliness of a world he had rejected. Or a world that had rejected him.
It's mesmerizing. It has stars. Now, you will follow me back inside, where you will be escorted to your head of house, and tell her in detail how you and your classmates obtained and consumed alcohol during your so-called party. You will apologize to her for breaking the rules, made for your own safety, and you will apologize to me too for your obnoxious behavior.
Potter rolled his eyes.
No, come on.
They set off at a slow pace, Potter stupidly gambolling ahead while singing a song Hagrid likes, and Severus checking for enemies and following behind him. A very suspicious threat behind a tree ended up being a rabbit, but Severus hexed it unconscious anyway. Clenching his teeth, he listened carefully to the quietness of the dark forest. An owl hooted in the distance, and the woods resembled dusty shadows shifting and breathing under an observing eye. The more they kept walking, the more Severus was convinced that this was madness.
Enough, Potter, and stay close.
Potter stopped to look back.
Don't you ever have fun. Don't you ever think. The creatures of the night... If the creatures of the night were really dangerous in Hogwarts, Hagrid would already be dead. Lower your wand.
Severus didn't lower it, and Potter kept disappearing as they walked.
Even Hermione has calmed down a bit. You should do it too. You can't think of your enemies all the time. You'll go mad.
He had already gone mad, and if he didn't think of his enemies would think of it first.
I don't see any fun in this, Potter. Perhaps you should have sneaked out with your wicked friends instead.
Perhaps, agreed Potter.
When the lake appeared in sight, Potter started running. Potter! He shouted, and then was struck by the absurdity of yelling Potter's name out in the open while wanting this to remain a secret. Severus widened his steps, and sheer terror attacked him at the possibility of losing Potter out here in the middle of the night. A mental image of Dumbledore's lips slowly mouthing, "Azkaban," landed on his mind, and he ran too.
Potter!
He found him lying spread eagle by the lake, panting hard and raising a foot up to unlace a shoe. Severus panted too, his chest aching as he loomed over Potter.
The boy looked ridiculous. Do that again and I'll petrify you.
Potter threw his shoes and socks aside and chuckled, his eyes darting between Severus and the sky.
I love life,
he stated louder than necessary. Severus lacked a bitter comment, so he just stared. His heart still ached from running, and he suddenly felt old. The reflection of the sky with its countless layers of constellations was spread on the surface of the lake, clear as crystal, pure as a virgin blanket of snow. Dark gray clouds loomed over the moon ominously, and suddenly the lake was brought to despair and darkness once more. The shrill cries of an animal broke the surface. Sharp, high-pitched sounds pierced through the night, but failed to disturb the peace. It occurred to Severus that they were part of it. On a distant tree, a nightjar made its tuk-tuk sound carelessly.
I love life,
Potter shouted again and broke into laughter as he rolled onto his stomach.
Gods, I'm happy.
Severus's heart tightened.
You're drunk and you're stupid. Don't confuse it with happiness. I'm drunk, I'm stupid, I'm happy, I love you,
Potter said cheerfully. Touching, he meant to say. His tongue being a dry sponge did not help.
Do you know what kind of beasts inhabit these grounds at night? Anything could happen. Anything. I bet you didn't even know you could have fun,
Potter said tenaciously as he rolled back to his back.
What makes you think I'm having fun?
Severus asked cautiously. Potter grunted as he struggled up to his feet.
You think the water is cold?
He pulled off his shirt and tossed it aside, beginning to unzip his jeans.
Don't even think of it, spat Severus, unless you want your head bitten off by hungry mermaids or Merlin knows what else lurks in there. I suggest you put your clothes back on and follow me back to the...
Potter landed face first, his splattering almost completely drowned out by Severus's angry shouts. In the space of a single moment, he completely disappeared from sight. Severus held his breath until the boy came up for air and gasped. Alive, he was alive. Potter couldn't keep that smile off his face, and his amusement didn't waver in the slightest at Severus's outrage.
He shook the water off his hair hastily.
It's not even deep,
He said loudly.
come on.
Severus could almost feel Dumbledore's twinkling eyes burning his nape along with Draco's questioning ones. He dimly wondered what kind of explanation would satisfy the Dark Lord. Severus stepped closer, and the water reached his shoes.
This is dangerous,
he said, hoping against hope to be obeyed. Potter stood up, his torso wet in the dim light of the night, wearing nothing but his knuckle boxers.
Oh my god, danger behind you.
He screamed as he raised a hand to point to something behind Severus's head. Severus turned abruptly, wand in hand, but saw nothing. Potter laughed and dove in again.
Is this how you were planning to introduce me to fun?
Severus yelled, even though Potter couldn't hear him. 1, 2, 3. Potter came up for another breath and narrowed his eyes. It occurred to Severus that he probably couldn't see much without his glasses. Severus's shoes were stuck in the mud.
I can think of other ways,
said Potter calmly. Severus felt his nails digging into his palms.
For the last time, get out!
Potter didn't. There was a strange feeling in the pit of Severus's stomach, and he was suddenly aware of the pitiful options remaining. It was a matter of self-respect, but Potter couldn't defy him forever. He'd learned this lesson, either he wanted it or not. Footing off his shoes, he bent down to yank his socks off, and then removed his shirt. Tossing his belt aside, he decided against taking off his trousers. His toes curled into the soft mud. Potter picked up that annoying song again and sang it loudly. Severus stepped into the water carefully and winced at the crisp coldness.
This is unthinkable,
he muttered. The strain against his legs increased, and he walked through the water in embarrassment for his sorry situation. Again. For all his situations that included Potter were sorry. Soon the water came up to just below his hips, and his wet trousers stuck to his skin. Potter looked up at him suspiciously.
Is that a scowl?
It was, and Potter was apparently blind. No, it's a wide smile of satisfaction. Potter came closer and rose. For someone who was about to graduate from adolescence, development had definitely skipped him. Unlike his despicable father, Potter was due to be short. Of course, he was doomed to be worse things, too. Severus gripped Potter's arm, but Potter resisted.
Don't be like that, I'm having fun.
What you're having, snarled Severus, is detention for the entire next year. Out! He tightened his grip, and Potter pushed against his chest, trying to release himself. The water splashed around them as they both struggled against each other. There was a moment of pure anger. Severus pulled at Potter viciously, indifferent of whether he would bruise the boy with his vigor. Their feet slid together as Potter planted his own in the mud stubbornly. Severus tried to stand straight, his lips tightly closed around swears he could not throw at a student. The air was knocked out of him as an elbow landed on his abdomen and a knee hit his shank. The pain had him wince, and Potter thrashed out of his grip, electrified. You will not get away with this, Potter. Out! Get out! Severus shouted, and the boy's protests were cut short by Severus's hand wrapping itself around his middle and stilling him. His own panting was suddenly the only sound Severus could hear. He was aware of baring his teeth in rage. Potter's breath hit his chin. He hadn't thought of which remark to make first when he parted his lips. A tongue attacked him before he could speak. It was warm. It tasted him gracefully in a demanding way Severus wasn't familiar with. The kiss ended as abruptly as it had started, and Potter pushed at the arm around his waist. Severus pulled away as though he had been burned. Swimming again, Potter let his head fall back on the water and watched the sky.
I'm going to miss Hogwarts,
he said quietly.
I don't want to be alone.
Severus swallowed the bile of ash that had stuck at the back of his throat.
Perhaps you should,
he croaked as he turned around to walk off the lake. Away from Potter's influence, he cast a drying spell on his trousers that barely managed to leave them damp, and he seated himself on the grass. He looked at the goddamn horizon with the moon and the stars, and the rest of the useless beauties Potter had suddenly discovered, and scoffed. His lips tasted of wetness. He forbade himself from darting his tongue out to taste it more than once. Somewhere not far away, an owl hooted again, loudly and sharply. Nature had never been worthy of admiration to Severus.
Praising the power of the peaceful nights and the love that lurked behind nature's wonders was meant to be done by stupid muggles eager to fall in love with people they barely knew. Severus had never been sentimental. He was quite the opposite, in fact. A sentimental person thought things would last. The romantic had the desperately reasoned confidence that they wouldn't. Potter followed him after a while and sat on the ground next to him, hugging his knees. He dried himself off with his shirt and didn't bother putting on his clothes.
What was that?
Severus asked, his eyes still on the lake.
What was what?
Severus didn't have the strength to argue. He avoided looking at Potter even as the boy jumped back to the water, and Severus laid back on the grass on the exact same spot Lily used to sit, and James used to sit, and even Lucius and Pettigrew and Tom Riddle himself had sat at some point of their lives. He counted the stars, quite proud of himself for being able to see them without hideous devices of glass glued on his face. He listened to Potter's woohoos, and to the demented owl, and to his own breath that didn't seem to have calmed down yet. For the best part of the last century, Hogwarts had become home to countless people who didn't stand any chance of finding home anywhere else. Hogwarts was a sanctuary. Whoever knew how to speak to it, whoever knew how to listen to it, could learn the truth. Hogwarts did not preach the importance of education and culture, not really. What it preached was the ancient unconditional law of life. A war would destroy that law, and the Dark Lord would eventually destroy Hogwarts. Severus had learnt long ago that if one had to leave a place that he lived in and loved, it should be done in any way except a slow one. Leave it the fastest way one can. It happened to be equally true for both places and people, but Severus didn't want to think of that. He often looked back and thought that an hour he remembered was a better hour because it was dead. Past years seemed safe, vanquished, while the future lived in a cloud dark and shaky. Hogwarts wasn't simply a home, and home was never a place to Severus. Home to Severus used to be Lily. He had never been this close to Lily. No. Lily had never been this close to him. The emptiness he felt at her absence was crushing. As he searched for his wholehearted affection, however, he failed to find it. He knew he loved her, but the simplicity of the truth, the fact that she was dead, hit him with no denial. It came to him as natural.
Are you trying to catch a cold?
Potter asked as he approached him again, putting on his glasses.
The water is perfect. I'm going back in. Come.
Ah, at least that hadn't changed. To Severus, home was always a person. End of part 2.